Hey, this is Matt Vojek, and this is the Creating Business Podcast. Each episode, I sit down and talk to a guest from the creative industries of advertising and marketing about work they've done for a business and their thought process behind all their decisions. By digging deep into projects and the decisions made, we unearth new insights and ideas about creating amazing work that moves the needle for businesses. This is the Creating Business Podcast. Alright, so the project in question this week is Test City, USA, by a team of people. One of those people, his name is J Klaus. Me and Jay have been friends for the last year or two now, and he is somebody that is heavily involved in the startup community, and he answers a lot of questions that I have when it comes to understanding some of these startups and understanding kind of that process of creating a business and understanding a little bit more about how people sell them and just the general culture around the startup community. He's kind of the go-to person in Columbus for that, and he has a really cool podcast that interviews people that are directly involved with startups and talks about some of the inner workings a little bit more. It's called Upside, in case you're wondering. Anyway, so Jay and his team, they created this film called Test City, USA. And I personally haven't seen it just yet. But I know quite a bit about it, and there's quite the buzz about it around town because he is somebody that has access to a lot of these people that are heavily involved in the startup community. So talking to a lot of these people and understanding a little bit more about kind of some of the stuff that's actually going on here is something that's incredibly valuable to other people that are either running startups or thinking about starting them. So so without further ado, let's learn a little bit more about Test City USA and talk to J Klaus. All right, I'm here with J Klaus.
Hello.
How's it going, Jay?
It's great.
You've done so many different podcasts.
I love podcasting.
How often are you a guest on podcasts?
A couple times a month, probably.
Really?
Yeah, but
Nice.
it's also a stated or intentional initiative for me right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how many podcasts do you record every month?
Well, we probably record at least half a dozen, but probably closer to a dozen podcast episodes a month.
That's like your full-time job then, huh?
It's close. And actually, I would love for that to be my full-time job. Like writing and podcasting, that's the type of life that I want to live. And we released episode 100, I was just telling you, of our podcast Upside today. So it's a lot of recording. Nice.
So we're definitely going to get into that. But let's start with the, project in question. It is called Test City, USA.
Wow.
So let's start there. Let's start with, what is it, in your own words? What is Test City, USA?
Test City, USA is a feature-length documentary about the Columbus startup ecosystem. I think we're in a pretty unique time here in 2019 with the infrastructure and what is happening here in Columbus, Ohio in the way of startups and technology-backed companies. And Test City, USA was an effort to profile and talk to all the different stakeholders in the ecosystem who have had a hand in getting us here and where we're trying to go, and look at it from a journalistic lens, just the same way we do on our podcast. It's not a fluff piece, certainly not a takedown piece either, but we didn't shy away from the criticisms of the ecosystem. We wanted to give a realistic look of, if you are not in Columbus or if you are in Columbus, you can see in this film what's going on here, what's going well, what people are challenging and what that means for the future to come.
Very nice. So now let's go back to kind of the moment that you had this idea, that you wanted to create this film.
Well, I would actually credit Eric, my co-host and partner in our company, with the idea. He wanted to do a long-form deep dive into specific cities. On our show, we talk to founders and community builders in cities across the country, but typically each episode talks to one person. So if we're talking about Memphis with a founder or even a community builder there, it's usually a data point of one. And so the idea was it'd be really great to do a deeper dive into an ecosystem like Memphis, like Kansas City, to get a more holistic look at what's going on there. And then we realized that that would be a difficult piece of audio to put together. A ton of voices, you can't associate them with a person, you wouldn't necessarily remember them if you can't like tag them with a name. We said this should probably be film. And then at that point, we just kind of tabled it because Eric and I don't have any equipment for that, nor any experience or like skill. And so we just kind of tabled it for quite some time. And then later in the year, we had the opportunity to be a part of a program called the Huntington Bucks GoPro 2.0 program.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I got the name correct. Huntington Bank partnered with Ohio State University and the athletic program specifically to give some internship and work experience to student athletes to prepare them for life after athletics. And so the fallout of that is the companies who were part of the program were able to hire as many interns as they wanted, as many as accepted positions in the program, and their internships were funded by Huntington Bank up to a certain amount of hours. One of the interns that interviewed with us, and we made an offer to, was a filmmaker. And so he said, this is cool. Now we have a resource to do a demo of this idea we had, which at the time we were calling State of the Ecosystem. We wanted to do a series of these films. And so we said, okay, let's do a demo of that. Let's make a 20 to 30 minute video. I think that's literally what we had in the job description. Let's do like a 20 to 30 minute video, and we'll use that as sort of a pilot to shop around and see if we can get a series of these things funded. And since I live in Columbus and have a lot of the relationships here, Columbus was the natural choice of a city to try. And so he started his internship, and I reached out with a Calendly link to so many people in the city that I would want to have in that film if it were a real thing. And they all said, yeah, I'll sit down for 30 minutes. And so we conducted something like 27 interviews of people like the City Council President Shannon Hardin, Mark Kwame, the partner at Drive Capital, Alex Frohmeyer, the CEO of Beam Dental, Dan Mangus, the CTO at Root Insurance, Don Dixon, the founder at Popcom, and then a bunch of community builders we've had here for a long time, Brian Zerker, Dan Rockwell, Arnab Nandi. We interviewed so many people here, Tom Walker at Rev 1 and Christy at Rev 1. And the film looked so good. Like, from the reel that Kyle Skinner, the director of the film, the reel that he sent us before the internship, he didn't even have the equipment to shoot what he shot for us at the time that he made those films. We didn't know he had the equipment that he had. And the audio was all great. I had this audio equipment for our podcast. So we literally had no lost footage or audio. And we started cutting it together, and we said we could make a full-length documentary out of this. And at some point, we said, okay, we've basically made a full-length documentary. Let's cap this internship off with doing a screening of what we've made here locally. And we go to the Gateway, and I'm almost wrapped up with the story, but we go to the Gateway, and we asked Chris Hamill, the president, we said, what would it take to do a screening here? And he said, we can do that. It's just part of what we do to support local Ohio filmmakers. We'll just do a door split. But if you have any interest in doing film festivals, you have to do film festivals first, because if you air a film theatrically, publicly, you'll lose your eligibility for most film festivals. Then he also said, luckily for you, we have a film festival next month, but our submission date is like now. So if you get me a clip in the next day or two of the movie, we'll review it and see if you're in the festival. And we turned that around. It was rough. They said you're in. And then we had about 4 weeks to finish post-production.
Wow.
Yeah, it happened really fast.
When did you guys officially start on it?
Internship started the first week of June.
Nice.
I think our first interviews were the second and third week. Actually, most of the interviews happened in July. No, it was June. interviews happened second and third week of June, and then they kind of became a lot more spaced out. Like we were doing 4 interviews a day for a couple weeks, and then it became like a couple interviews a week through the end of June and the first week or 2 of July. And we entered post-production mid-July and kind of let Kyle run and do his thing. He came back with a super rough cut, and we started doing a whole storyboard. The story that we thought would happen just didn't. And so we started from scratch with just what we heard from the interviews and pulled it all together. And yeah, it was almost an irresponsibly short time frame to do a full-length documentary.
So, you know, one of the things that I've heard a few times from a few people by doing this podcast is that they have an idea for something, but they don't necessarily have like the exact skill set it takes to make it happen. I mean, you're familiar with that world of film and audio. I don't know. Like, does that ever stop you from doing anything? Like, how does that affect like the ideas that you have?
I think I have a bias for action. So when something's uncertain, which everything is, if you're doing something that's not uncertain, then you've either done it a bunch before or it's a well-tread path, and it's kind of a question of should you be doing it then, in my opinion. But because I have a bias for action, I just always look to tip over the first domino. You know, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know it starts with interviews. And then I don't know what I'm doing, but I know it starts with laying out, you know, sort of an outline. When we're talking about what the film actually looked like from a storyboard perspective, I thought of it as an outline. And then as you go through, you watch it, and it's the classic Ira Glass quote, right? You know, where you have this eye and this taste that is killer, but the thing that you're making just isn't quite as good as you want it to be. I feel like I've been honing that eye for, you know, close to 10 years now, at least 5 or 6. And I watched the film, and as I started thinking about this as a film that I wanted to see on a screen, like the big screen, my lens completely changed, which is almost unfair to Kyle, but probably better for him, right? Instead of saying this is going to be something that is a proof of concept that people get the idea of what we're trying to actually do, this was an actual film, and I was looking at it through the lens of, if I watch this from Netflix or HBO, would I think, what was this doing on here? And most of that was just intuition, you know, like, I expected there to be a cut at the end of that sentence, and there wasn't. Or that B-roll was on screen and then it cut off earlier than I expected. Or, you know, the title cards on these interviewees, they just don't look right, you know, like all that stuff you can see and you can't quite understand. So then you're looking at comps, like the title card specifically. I looked back for screenshots of the Defiant Ones on HBO, the documentary about Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine. And all their stuff just looks so good. So I was like, let's just make the title cards look as close as possible to what they did, you know? So it was just like a bunch of pulling inspiration from stuff like that. And I'd never done it before, but you just problem solve, you know?
I think that's, for me, that's one of the better situations that we get to work in is whenever our client has a decent amount of knowledge about something, but they're not so close to it to where they're like, oh, should we change that color a little bit? Let's move that just a little bit. Because then the focus is always on the story.
Yeah.
The focus is on that main thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I always, like, that's why, whenever I make something, I always ask my wife about it. I'm like, well, what do you think about this? And, like, she doesn't have, like, much knowledge in, like, the details that go into it. I'm like, and she always says that. She's like, I don't know what you're, like, exactly looking for. I'm like, I want you to watch this as a person and tell me, does it make sense? Yeah. Like, I don't know. Which
is also, like, so scary and hard, just to bring something that you know is not good or not finished and go to someone close to you and be like, what do you think? Because everybody loves to, like, a lot of people tell you very directly, like, this is why this is wrong or bad. And it's so hard to strengthen the thickness of your skin to be okay with that, because you know so much about, like, I also know I need to fix these 3 things. And those are the first 3 things, you know, they'll say. Like, if you know the transitions are bad, or you know that you don't have title cards on yet, the first points of feedback from my girlfriend too were like, hey, I don't know who that is. Or like, this felt long. And it's like, yeah, I know we don't have any B-roll in there yet. But you have to, like, hear that and still solicit and listen to that feedback and be grateful for it, or you'll lose the opportunity to get it in the future, you know, if you lash out and say, well, it's not done yet.
For sure. So kind of taking a little bit of a step back here. What makes you kind of, what are the series of events that kind of led you up to this point? Like, you were very close to the startup community here. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Like, why are you so close to the startup community here?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to trace back in retrospect, but working forward, I joined the Entrepreneurship Club at Ohio State University when I was there as a student. And that got me introduced to an internship program with a startup here locally. And through that startup and through that club, I found Startup Weekend, which was just getting started here locally, where I met a lot of the other people in the community at large who are interested in startups. And I built a bunch of relationships. I worked and organized a ton of Startup Weekend events. I organized Startup Week for the first couple of years. And then I started my own company here while still living in Columbus. And so all of that time, whatever scene that Columbus has or had, I was a part of it, and it just wasn't huge yet. So it was easy to be plugged in at that time if you're getting started and we're working with the right people. And then sometime, probably close to 2 years ago, I made the conscious decision of, I just want to think and play a little bigger. And so that came down to my business was not geographically constrained. I was trying to work with people all over the country. Our podcast was all over the country. And then, now coming back to this film, it's kind of like this intersection of, yes, I want to play bigger and I want to make this film through the lens of, if people are not in Columbus, they can watch this and understand it and have interest in it. I think about ecosystem builders like myself who are in other cities. I would want to watch a movie like this about Minneapolis, about Seattle, places that I may consider moving someday if that's my aspiration, or someplace, if I'm in San Francisco, I want this to be something that they look at and say, I'm sick of this place. I want to move to a different city, but I don't know if someone like me can be fulfilled there. I was trying to make it for people all over the country. The awesome thing was I also got to combine that with my natural love of this place that I've called home for 10 years. I thought of it as I was working through it. I had this weird, bittersweet, it felt like I was making a love note to Columbus without, making it such a puff piece, which it wasn't. But it felt like I was making a very real showcase of why this is a city I care so much about, despite its flaws, despite the things that are challenging, why this city means so much to me. It was like this really weird cathartic exercise I was working through. And to still have, like I said, a national lens and this now snapshot, I can't wait to watch this film 10 years from now.
Yeah.
From the same seat of saying, what is Columbus like now? Well, here's what it was 10 years from now, because we have a probably 20-minute segment of the film that talks about the period of time from 1998 through 2013 or so, and how much change happened in that 15-year period, but pretty slow over 15 years, and then what the pace of change has been over the last 5 in comparison. And I only expect that momentum to keep up. And so to look back on this film 10 years from now, I think it's going to be wild, absolutely crazy.
Yeah. So you say that you want people in San Francisco to see this right here. I mean, how do you imagine that this is going to change how they view Columbus, a city in the Midwest?
I think you hear stories of it happening all the time already, but slowly, right? When people come to Columbus, they see this place and they're like, oh, this is not what I expected. There's actually more for me here than I thought. Food's pretty good, really smart, interesting, kind people. And now we have some of these very impactful, high growth startup companies and creative companies, like a whole creative class of people here that they didn't expect. And telling stories through film or audio or any other medium, is a very effective way to tell a story to a lot of people at once. But we heard it in interviews in the film with Alex Frohmeyer of Beam Dental. They've been around since 2013, and they moved here from Louisville around 2014, and they had a hard time finding executive talent to move to Columbus, Ohio to work with Beam. And now they have executive talent from the coast calling them, seeing what's available here. I'm looking at these 3 cities in the Midwest, and Columbus is one of the top on my list, and I want to see what's available. Because not only can people come here and join a high growth company and enjoy that company, but if and when they want to leave, there are other opportunities too. There's not just one pony in town anymore. I think it's the thing that bummed me out about Columbus for a long time, and still does to some degree, was that the most talented, ambitious, interesting people that I would meet and be friends with would eventually move, because Columbus was not a destination city for anything. Still isn't, in my opinion. And so people who really want to do comedy or want to get into TV or film or music or even like design and advertising and marketing, like Columbus isn't the place for that. If you're at the highest levels of ambition and you don't want to be the person creating the scene. Now we have more people who are saying, you know what? Nah, I love the city. I'm going to help create the scene. And that flywheel is beginning to turn in the startup community, in the creative community, and those people are sticking around. And I think they feed into each other. And that may be insofar as they're related. You know, more people in the creative class are seeing people in the technology sector or other sectors like staying here and being tastemakers and influencers and creating the culture. And so more people want to stick around. So I think they're related, but maybe not completely directly, you know.
For sure. And that I mean, it's similar to my story. So being from Cleveland area, I mean, I've known that I wanted to be involved with design and creativity at very, very early age. I just didn't like anything else, honestly. So I always had that assumption that like, I had to go to Los Angeles or New York if I wanted to be successful at this. And like, I drilled that in my brain, like to the point where nobody could convince me anything else, and nobody was trying to. Everybody was agreeing with me, right? So, and maybe that's where that assumption kind of came from. But you know, from there went to school in Pittsburgh, and then moved out to Los Angeles. And like I don't know, like I'm not like a beach person. I'm not like a Los Angeles kind of person. I mean, it's beautiful there, but so whenever I moved there, it was like, I'm doing this because I need to know, like, is this the thing that I needed to do? So I was there for like 3 years or so, and I kind of came to that realization that I'm like working with bigger brands and stuff like that, but like I think I could do better work somewhere else. Like have a little bit more freedom in things. Like, you know, being there working for a company that like they had to just take on whatever job they could because rent was ridiculous. Yeah. So like they're just saying yes to everything, and it's like I don't think that's how you make a creative environment. Yeah. Sorry, this isn't. No, I mean
you're the perfect case study of this. You went out somewhere because you're like, that is the place for me to do this thing, and you came back. So I would like to hear, you know, why, and now that you're back, what does that mean to you? Yeah.
So like listen to you go. It's like you do this.
It's like I interview.
So whenever my first my son was born, it was like, all right, now is probably a good time. Like I think I've kind of done this to the point where like I'm happy with it. Like I can tell people that I did it, whatever. Like 3 years I thought was a good amount of time to where it's like I didn't give up early or anything like that. But those big dreams that I had just became kind of less important. Where I'm like I don't need to do those things. I just want to make stuff. I want to make cool stuff. Like I can. So I don't tell people about this usually, but I'm credited with an Academy Award.
Amazing.
For the movie Whiplash. I did visual effects on it.
Oh, wow. Sick.
Yeah, but like the stuff that I did on it.
Did that win Best Picture?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, I honestly don't even know if I actually worked on it when it was in the studio at that time, because we worked on so many just random things that like you don't really know like what the potential is of any of these things. And you're painting out boom mics from the top of the frame because they get tired. So it's like doing like little stuff like that, and like so it won Academy Award, but like I'm not like the work that I did on it, if I even did anything on it when it was in studio, it's like it wasn't anything special.
Here's the thing though, here's how I think about situations like that, because I've had some of those too, right? And even this film, we won Best Ohio Feature at the Film Festival of Columbus. Nice. And I don't know how much weight that award carries, but you know what? Neither does anybody else. And if that is a story that you can take and a narrative that you can own, and that opens the door to opportunity that you know you can take advantage of and do good work on, then heck yeah, use that. Use that Academy Award credit to be like, hey, by the way, I've won an Academy Award. And they're like, oh, wow, we're going to go with maybe one of these other agencies, but let's go with you guys now. Let's go with Made by Things. Yeah. And then you crush it. And you only got that opportunity because of this story you're able to tell. Who cares? You know, everyone's happy.
I guess that's the thing. Like, so like working on some of this stuff, like it just never really meant as much to me as it did for me to work with a little bit smaller companies and be able to do a lot for a little company rather than a little for a big company. Like that was always my thing. So whenever I was looking for places to live, I was like, okay, I want to live on this side of the Mississippi somewhere. It's like Chicago, New York I was looking at, Raleigh I was looking at, and Columbus. And, even being from Ohio, I never visited Columbus before.
Where'd you grow up?
Around Cleveland, like about 40 miles east of Cleveland. But we're never like that kind of traveling family. Whenever I went to Los Angeles for the first time, that was the first time I went farther west than Indiana from Ohio. Like, we never went that way for any reason. The first time I was ever on a plane, it's like all these firsts for me. But anyway, so I had it narrowed down between like all these cities and talking to my wife about it. Like, where do we want to go? Like I knew that wherever I went, we were going to start. Well, I was going to start a company basically, and I was like, I didn't want to start it there again because it would have been just really risky and like
hard to bootstrap.
Exactly, just incredibly hard there. And as a huge Browns fan, I love the underdog. Like, I love the small, like the idea of the small city. So kind of took out New York because I was like, more of the same. Chicago, I was like, I like Chicago. I like visiting there a lot, but I was like, I don't know if that's really the place for me. I think it would mean so much more if I picked a place that I said I would never come back to again and work. Like, I remember telling my mom that as soon as I moved. I'm like, I'm never coming back to Ohio. And she cried. I'm like, I'm sorry. It's not like your fault. I don't think that there's anything here for me. And like, to come to that realization, I'm like, oh my God, I think there is something here for me. Yeah. And seeing that there was an established creative community that was growing at a rapid rate, that caught my attention for sure.
Yeah.
And then once I got here, then I started seeing the startup community growing as well. So I kind of became involved with both of those community. I don't know. It's weird, but
have you heard the term boomerang?
It's like the people that leave and then they come back.
Which I actually think is great. On one hand, you could say, well, why leave at all? Just stay here and make things awesome. But I think boomeranging is really great because, I have friends in San Francisco who would say that their argument is, being here full-time sucks in a lot of ways, but it's an investment in your network. You come out here, you live for a few years, you meet so many amazing people, and that's a network that you keep with you forever. And even just like an understanding of how the world works out there. The companies here, when they are fundraising and they have to raise past like a seed round, even a Series A, they often have to go essentially live on the coast for a month and take meetings and fundraise from coastal investors. And having experience there, relationships there, understanding the lay of the land, that would mean so much. I spent my first week in San Francisco last month. Never been there before. And we had a bunch of founders come through who were part of Y Combinator. Huge startup accelerator, arguably the best startup accelerator that ever has been. All those founders would talk about like, our seed round is pretty easy. We raised it in like 15 minutes after demo day, but our Series A was tough. Like, it took us 6 months. I know founders who go a year and a half trying to raise their Series A or taking that long to close their Series A. It's just a very different capital environment there. And you go and you meet these people and you're like, these are really cool, smart people. But they're not cooler or smarter than the people in Ohio.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, everyone's the same. They're just playing with a different set of rules. They're playing on a different field. And it's not even necessarily like a professional field versus a collegiate field, if you want to use a sports analogy. It's just a different field, and they're playing with a different set of rules and constraints. And, I think the constraints that are on founders or creators or people generally in the middle of the country where things are not as readily available, I think it creates a very resilient, capital efficient mentality that we're going to see be more and more valuable to capital allocators, investors.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this, like what is it that you want Columbus to become?
I want it to become the best version of itself. I don't think that the moniker like the next Silicon Valley fits for any city.
Yeah.
And I don't think it should. What's interesting conceptually and also frustrating about Columbus is that we don't have a clear identity yet, and we never have. Mm-hmm. A lot of cities will have this cultural baggage of the oil industry or the steel industry, and now they're trying to reinvent themselves. Columbus is not reinventing itself. It's still defining itself. And we have these competing industries like the creative class, arts, culture, fashion, retail, insurance, even education to some degrees. And now robotics is becoming a big thing here. It's really interesting to see all of these competing, leading efforts for what you could associate Columbus as being a destination city for. And I think that's awesome. And I hope that people continue to carve that out and make Columbus a destination city for a lot of things. So it's not really what I want Columbus to become so much as I just want Columbus to keep growing into its potential and keep attracting and retaining really, really talented, intelligent people.
Yeah. So now the flip side of that question, is there anything that, I mean, do you ever like think like that you're worried that Columbus might become something at some point? Like,
No.
yeah.
No. I mean, I do hear from like my friends in Denver how much they hate the growth happening in Denver and people moving there and setting up, and there's just like very few quote unquote locals in Denver anymore. Yeah. And I'm sure that comes with a slew of problems with transportation and gentrification and a ton of like societal cultural issues. I am bullish and optimistic that the government here errs on a side of action, that our Smart Columbus team is being really thoughtful about the way they approach transportation. Smart Columbus gets a lot of they get a lot of flack for things that I don't think is warranted, because first of all, you have to understand that when we won the Smart City competition from the Federal Department of Transportation, that grant was a transportation grant. So that grant money had to be spent on transportation related ideas and focus. And so when people say like, oh, smart city is a lot more things than transportation, yes, very, very true. But a lot of our grant money to the federal government was related directly to transportation, so we're going to put some time into that. And I think, well, we're the largest metropolitan that doesn't have a light rail system in the country. Why don't we put light rail in now that we have this money in this grant? Well, because if we're trying to be the model for national smart cities, maybe spending our one-time multi-billion-dollar purchase on a new transportation system should not be based in 30-year-old technology. Like maybe we should be thinking about new ways of doing that, and maybe that takes some time and thought, you know? And so I'm optimistic that team is doing a lot to explore the options and see what's being tried and working, and being patient to say we're going to get one shot at like a huge shift in how we think about transportation and moving people around and connecting people to their city. Let's do that thoughtfully. I think Columbus has a good chance of doing that really well and genuinely being a model for other areas of the world, not even just country. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say that you're worried that it would become overrun with scooters.
No, I don't mind the scooters.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is I've never used a scooter here in Columbus.
Me neither. I've come close once, but...
Yeah, it's something, when they're in Santa Monica, which is where Bird started, loved it. But also, I was so unfamiliar with Santa Monica that I didn't know how far things were. Living in Columbus, I've built my life so that I can be walkable to things I care about.
Yeah.
Or a short drive. But like the places that I was doing short drives to, scooters don't accomplish. Mostly I'm just walking. I've used Kogo. And so the question always became like, well, do I want to spend money I wasn't spending before to get there a couple minutes faster than when I was walking? And I've just said no.
Yeah. So getting back to the film, one of the things that you said earlier was like it wasn't exactly the story that you wanted to tell. What was the story that you wanted to tell?
It wasn't even a question of wanting. Like I wanted to tell an accurate story of what the people here thought about the city. I just thought that it would take a different form, to be a little bit more direct and candid. We heard a lot more in the interviews about the role that state government and state politics plays in the startup ecosystem here. Specifically programs like Third Frontier and Jobs Ohio and the entrepreneurial service programs that fall under Third Frontier. It's a lot of terminology that you hear thrown around a lot. But this film gave me the excuse to really dig in deeper and see what that all looked like and how it played together. And I didn't expect that to be what came up as, part of the central conflict we hear about. And at the end of the day, people are critical of different organizations or different ways that the rules of the game are set here, right? But at the end of the day, my big takeaway from this process is nothing's perfect. The way that Columbus has gotten to where it is unique and different, and that comes with some natural trade-offs. But that wouldn't really matter if we just bolted on more of everything. And this is something that Matt Armstead, who's a local founder, angel investor, and partner at Horizon 2 Labs, he was just like, I love everything we have here, but we just need more. And that's more companies, more investors, more support from the community itself. All the things that are negative and you may have an axe to grind about, they're doing a very good service on the whole. And if we just had more investors to cooperate with and to collaborate with, and if we had more companies for them to invest in, it wouldn't really matter.
Yeah. So going through this process of making this film, was there a certain point where you're like, hey, I think this is going to be something for sure. Like this is going to be special.
There were moments in interviews where I was like, I can't believe they said that.
Really?
Because being an insider in the community, you hear all sides of everything. And you hear the good, you hear the bad, and rarely do you see the bad aired under someone's real name in headlines or on footage. Like, everybody wants to play nice, and everybody wants to be shown to get along, or at least not publicly be defaming or talking bad about any aspect of anything. And there are some moments in the interviews where people would explicitly say, like, this is what I have a problem with. And I don't think we could have done this documentary without some of those moments, because how boring would a film be if there was no conflict? You know? So the struggle was, how do we piece together this film to showcase that conflict and do it paired with, you know, the other side of the table too, show it in an even way, and still have it be interesting. Like, we wanted to be even, we wanted to be interesting. Like, we were neutral in creating the film. We didn't have any bias we were trying to put into it or tell the story of. We just wanted to tell the story the best we could without also unfairly painting anyone as villains or, total detractors, because that wasn't the way any of the interviews went. And that was like a really challenging puzzle to put together, because just in the way that you make film, as you know, even the way that you would order certain interviews, or the way that you could cut some things, anything that was critical or a little controversial, we left the cuts intentionally long, so you could see, like, we didn't manufacture this. And those were things that, again, I didn't have any training in how to do. It's just like watching it over and over again. I thought this is the way that we have to put these things together, so that the story is being told the way that the story is actually being experienced, which was super challenging.
Yeah. How many people were involved?
In making the film or in being interviewed?
Both.
We interviewed 27 people.
Oh, wow.
I produced, Kyle directed, Eric executive produced. We had 2 other interns that we called production assistants. And then that's pretty much it, other than, some of the ancillary people at the companies of the people we interviewed that would, like, send us B-roll and things like that. Yeah. So, probably around 40 people in total. Yeah. So, first of all, when is this actually going to be? I know you just posted about this. Everyone's asking you. But great question.
When do you think it's going to be out for everyone to see?
Well, we're still learning some of these rules about film festivals and what's allowed. My gut tells me, and I'll know more here this week, my gut tells me that we're going to submit to more film festivals, and we're going to ride that out for a while, and we're going to take some of the things that we learned in that first viewing. Like, when you put something on a theater-sized screen into a theater sound system for the first time, you're going to notice things are a little bit different than when they were on your laptop. Yeah. So there's some stuff in that way that we want to clean up. We want to add a little bit more B-roll, fix the coloring. So there's iterations we want to make, and we'll do more film festivals. But likely, we'll have this online at some point here in 2019. But to be determined. You know, I think if you want to know more about that, go to upside.fm/update. That's our quarterly publication, and in this quarter, we're talking about the film, and we're just going to send an alert to that email list when it's available publicly. Nice. So upside.fm/update. We'll give more information there, but I don't know, to be honest. Yeah. No, this world of film festivals, we're actually premiering, right? Yes. We're here tonight, a short film that we started working on in June. Yes. And that's what, like, I've been
really diving into that world too and understanding, like, yeah, there's certain festivals that they need to premiere it, and then there's a lot that don't seem to really care. They just want to make sure that it was made within the last year or so.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's such a weird. It's so difficult because it's like the chicken or the egg kind of thing, and you're like, well, which egg do I want?
Yeah, and it's a question of, like, what do you want to do with this film? Most people who are doing film festivals, they want to get distribution through, like, theater releases or into different, like, streaming platforms and things like that. And starting this project, again, thinking this was going to be a demo of something, we just hadn't put those goals in place yet. This very quickly became a, like, hey, let's have a screening and show our friends, to, oh, we're in a film festival and we sold out their largest theater, to, hey, how else can I watch this thing? Yeah. Like, we hadn't planned for that. So we're talking as a team now, like, how we want to approach that, what we want to do with it. But yeah, I mean, I'm all ears for your experience.
I'll let you know. So, you know, what's the plan in the future for this kind of thing? I know that you're a very busy person doing a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But as far as, you know, you created this film, you just kind of proved to yourself and others that you can produce a film. Now what?
What I've proven to myself is that I like to make things, and I like larger efforts. So to me, this is less an indication that, oh, I'm going to keep making a ton more films and I'm going to be a filmmaker, and more an indication that other projects that I want to take on that I've been a little bit intimidated of, like writing a book, I'll probably do that sooner rather than later, because I know it's within me and I can do that and I can figure it out. Even, you know, the process of creating this film, in my head, I was tying this back to just a couple days ago. It's like, oh, there's a lot of corollaries to how I think I would start to create and research for a book now that I've done this. And there are little things that Kyle did as a director when we're making the film. Like, every interview we did, he took that footage that night and split the interview into separate clips based on the question I asked, tagged them, put them in a spreadsheet. And so as we're putting the story together, I could say, oh, we're talking about the Series A funding gap right here. I know that came up in the interview with Tom Walker. We can go to the spreadsheet, go to Tom Walker's section, see the questions I asked, and quickly pull that clip in. Holy crap, what an amazing system for pulling together a ton of content in a short period of time without having to constantly, like, rewatch things and try to find it. So it really got me thinking about how to structure and do larger scale projects, and I'll probably just do more of those, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that I mean, as somebody that has done several kind of, I guess I'd call it a strange project, because it's not necessarily like what you do, but it's something related to it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Once you complete those first one or two, you just, I don't know, it builds so much confidence where you're like, okay, well, I don't know how to go into this, but I know that I'll figure it out. Like, I don't know. There's something about that. And then there's also something kind of addicting to that feeling of completing something and being able to show it to people and getting a positive response from it. I mean, call it what you will. I don't know if it's healthy or not, but like there's just something that, like, when people see something that you've done and they really like it, just I don't know. You don't think about that while you're working on it, but once you finish it, you're like, well, now we got to show people this thing. Like, I don't know. Totally. It's like, I don't know.
And I expect that, you know, as we're figuring out this film festival thing, we will find ways to show the film to more people here locally. Like, there are people who are in the film who couldn't make the screening, and like, how can I watch it? And I'm just like, you can't. Because you can't, like, just host it on YouTube and hope that nobody shares it. It's just not possible. But we'll find a way to do some more small room screenings here locally throughout the year, and hopefully in the next month or so.
Yeah. And, have you thought about doing? This is completely not a podcast question, but have you thought about doing on Vimeo? They have it so you can, like, rent movies for like $3 or $4. Have you thought about doing something like that? Because there's one documentary that I saw that they did a trailer for. It's called Make, and that was the first time that I ever, like, paid money to watch, like to rent a video on Vimeo, and it was so good that I'm like, wow, like, I'll do that more often now.
Crazy. And and that's protected because Vimeo is pretty good about this. There'd be no way to, like, pirate that or pull that down.
I would assume so, yeah.
Interesting. That's very interesting. That might be something
I would definitely look into that. How long is the video total?
It's 91 minutes.
91 minutes? Holy cow.
Yeah. It's a full-length documentary.
Yeah, it is. Wow. So do you ever see yourself ever making more of these films?
Yeah, potentially. It's definitely in the realm of what we're talking about as a team, because it's something that we could do for other cities.
Mm-hmm.
And that fits very well with the media company, the Up company that produces the podcast, Upside. So there's a world where we do that. It's a question of, is that what we want to do with all of our time? You know,
Mm-hmm.
for me personally,
Yeah.
I'm working on a lot of other projects. So do I want to commit all of my time for a year to making a couple more of these films? TBD. Haven't decided.
Yeah. I think that's great, though. I don't know. Like, see what happens.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So, final question: where can people find out more about you and what you do?
Totally.
And I think you already talked about the film a little bit, but go on.
You should probably be able to see the way my name is spelled in the title of this episode. So just go to jklaus.com or @jklaus on any social channel, and that's where you can find me.
That's pretty impressive that you got your name on everything.
Intentional, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. This is a great conversation.
Thanks for having me, man.
Cool. And I'm back with a recap. Another awesome conversation with another just truly incredible person that just does whatever they have to do to make something come to life. For the recap, that's probably the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about was just, when you come across an idea that, you come across some kind of story or something like that you want to tell, and a lot of people will just automatically choose a specific medium, maybe the medium that they're most comfortable with to make it happen. But then there's some people like Jay who, maybe we're not super experts at film, but we can get together with people that know this stuff, and we can make this idea come to life. There's just something about those kinds of people that me personally, I love to surround myself with people like that just get things done and understand the struggles of what it takes to bring something to life, and that doesn't scare them, doesn't make them run away. They gladly take on these giant challenges. That's another point to recap here is I guess just the way that he operates inside of a community is something that I think is really unique and special. He is most definitely a connector. And I believe it's Malcolm Gladwell that writes about these different people, and I'm pretty sure it's in The Tipping Point, where he talks about people like Jay that are connectors, that know a lot of different people. They know how to kind of get things done, and those are the people, if you have questions about something, you go through them, because they have they have a lot of points of connection to kind of point you in the right direction. And I think that's incredibly valuable for a community, for sure. But that idea of either be that person or find that person is super important, in ideas, in projects, in business. That's my recap. Really appreciate you guys listening to this. Also, and again, check out Jay's podcast. It's Upside. It's called Upside. You might have to search for that on iTunes and such. It's definitely one of the faster growing podcasts, and for good reason. He has some really amazing conversations out there. Definitely worth checking out. So, that's all I got. Love you. Bye.